Hi and welcome to the Allplane Podcast, where we talk with the movers and shakers that are redefining the future of commercial aviation. As usual, before we start, let me remind you once more that all previous episodes of this podcast, as well as many other aviation stories, are available on the Allplane website. That's Allplane.tv, Allplane.tv. Today we're talking about aviation sustainability and innovation, but from the perspective of venture capital, because the sort of new ideas and technologies that we often talk about here in this humble podcast are unlikely to happen unless they have access to early stage capital. So our guest today is Stephen Snyder, Managing Director of JetBlue Ventures. Set up in 2016 by the airline of the same name, JetBlue, JetBlue Ventures was one of the first venture capital firms affiliated directly with a major airline. Since then, pretty much all other large airlines and even airports and OEMs have followed suit and have now whole divisions or subsidiaries dedicated to scouting the aerospace and travel startup scene and investing in the most promising projects. JetBlue Ventures was one of the pioneers and has remained one of the major players in this space so far. In this episode, we talk with Stephen about his early personal entrepreneurship story and about the path that led him to lead JetBlue Ventures. We also talk about the JetBlue Ventures investment theme, so basically the ideas and trends they focus on when looking for new investment opportunities. And we also review some of the most prominent startups they have invested in. Some very well-known names in the industry, such as Joby Aviation, Universal Hydrogen, which actually was here on the podcast, The Air Company, Flyer Labs, and many other. More generally, we also talk about how specialist venture capital firms that are closely affiliated with the industry can bring to the table some interesting expertise, know-how, and access to commercial opportunities. And this can be immensely valuable for entrepreneurs and startups alike. Last but not least, Stephen also shares some insights about what he sees as the major trends shaping the travel and aviation industries right now, and how those of you that might have interesting ideas in this field can reach out to the JetBlue Ventures investment team to pitch your ideas and potentially turn them into reality. So without further ado, let me welcome Stephen to the podcast. Hello, Stephen. How are you?
Hi, Mikel. I'm doing wonderful. Thank you so much for having me on.
I think you're joining us from California. So it's morning for you. It's evening here. It's becoming kind of a usual thing here in this podcast, usually talking with people that are in your time zone. We're used to this time difference.
I'm grateful for you taking me so late in the day on a Friday before you could be heading out for the weekend. Yeah, and I'm grateful for you chatting with me at 9 o'clock Pacific instead of 6 a.m. Pacific sometimes, some of the calls I have to take. So thank you so much for making the time for me.
No problem at all. When you work in as a freelancer, a freelance content producer in such a global industry, you get used to working with all time zones. In this podcast, I've got people from New Zealand. I've got people from different places in America. So it's every day is a different time zone. I mean,
well, that's so cool. It's like you're traveling the world from behind the microphone there across all these different time zones. Yeah,
pretty much. Where about in California are you now?
I'm in San Francisco, so I feel really lucky. I just moved here a few months ago, but I need to settle in. I've been traveling so much. I'm lucky I got to see you in Amsterdam about a month ago, Mikel, at World Aviation Festival.
Yeah, indeed.
But I've been traveling so much. I was in Finland, I was in Romania, I was in Amsterdam with you, Poland, New York a lot, Montreal a lot the last few months, that I'm excited to just have some time before the end of the year to settle in San Francisco and not be traveling for a change.
It sounds a very, very interesting roster of cities you've been in lately.
Right.
Well, just let me introduce you briefly to the audience. So you're the managing director of JetBlue Ventures, which is one of the earliest and most active VC firms in the aviation and travel space. Well, let me put it this way. It's one of the earliest examples of an airline creating its own venture investment arm. It was set up, I think, by JetBlue, by the airline. Then other airlines have been following this example. And right now we've got a bit of a boom of all sort of in-house venture arms set up by different companies in aerospace, in the airline industry. But I think JetBlue Ventures was one of the very first. So yeah, you're the managing director. So tell us a bit more about yourself and how you ended up in that role.
Yeah, and you're right, Mikael. JetBlue Ventures was founded in 2016. I believe we were the first in the States, but I think globally, Hangar 51 from IAG and Cockpit Ventures from El Al might have preceded us, but all founded around the same time. And now we've seen a bunch of others join us in the space, which is super exciting. About myself, I've been with JetBlue more broadly for about 5.5 years now. I joined in May 2017, right after doing my business master's degree. While I was getting my MBA, I had a crazy idea to start a business in the airport retail space. We're trying to do barbershops in airports.
Wow.
So we were called, I could give you the whole pitch. I still have it memorized pretty much. You have a lot of male business travelers who need to look good when they're on the road, but they don't know a good place to do it, and they don't have the time when they're at home, so on and so forth. And I can give you that whole shtick, but I'll spare you today. We were called Aircuts, so a play on words instead of haircuts, Aircuts. If it wasn't that, it would have been American Airlines, or it would have been the Hairport or the Hair Mall. And there were a lot of really bad dad jokes in there. But it was that experience of trying to start a business in this space that was really educational for me. I made sure that my curriculum and the classroom education that I was getting at school was 100% oriented around entrepreneurship and venture capital, and also, randomly enough, airlines and aerospace systems, because the university that I was at the time, University of Pennsylvania, has a really wonderful engineering school and a really wonderful design school. So I was able to take classes that were cross-listed in that, and just really use my time in the master's program to get educated on airlines and get educated on startups and VC and entrepreneurship. As soon as I graduated from my master's program, I joined JetBlue in the corporate strategy team. I had that role for 3.5 years. It was a really interesting cross-functional role where I helped manage budgets and IT resources and executive leadership priorities. And how do we align all of those competing forces against each other? So I did that for 3.5 years. And through that process, I got to know a little bit about a lot of things. I got to know, there's this project going on in tech ops about how do we modernize our inventory tracking system, or there's this project going on in loyalty about how do we deliver better rewards to our customers, or this project going on in the customer support in the call center about making sure we all have the right information when we're greeting a customer over the phone. So I like to say that I knew a little bit about a lot of things. Which was really natural for a role that they were looking to fill at JetBlue Ventures. So I had originally joined the JetBlue Ventures team about 2 years ago as the operating principal. And in that capacity, my job was to help forward the interests of the companies that we have invested in, help align them to where there's a good innovation use case within JetBlue, really understand the different needs of the different business units. So that built very naturally upon the prior job that I had, where I knew a little bit about everything and I knew which doors to knock on and how to get responses for things. I did that for a year, and then I was really fortunate that the managing director role opened up and I was able to step into that. So in total, it's been 5.5 years with JetBlue, the last 2 with Ventures, and every day's been such an education. And I've learned so much in the travel, VC, and startup space over that time.
Wow, pretty impressive. And may I ask what happened with that retail venture?
I feel very lucky that it did not go forward. I think I learned that there are very high barriers to entry in the airport retail space. And while I do see some insurgents trying to break in, it's hard to get there. I did not want to have to personally collateralize any loans, personally guarantee anything. I feel very lucky that it was 2017, 15, 16, 17 that I was building this idea. I had no way of knowing that COVID was coming. And with COVID, it meant that airport retail took a big hit, and especially something like something that is that up close and personal as getting your hair cut. I think people were very reluctant to do for big parts of the pandemic. So I would have really been hit very hard. So I'm very relieved that it didn't work out. Sometimes the entrepreneurs get very frustrated when something doesn't go their way and they can't complete their startup. But sometimes it's a blessing in disguise, and you don't know that at the time.
Indeed. Yeah, actually, that's pretty much what came to my mind when you mentioned it. I mean, I think it sounds like a terrific idea, but yeah, the airport environment sounds quite challenging for a startup. But
yeah, you don't get the same returns too. It's not venture backable. But yes, Mikel.
No, I was about to say that actually that reminded me that I flew Virgin Atlantic on, I think they call it the upper class, which is their business class. Yeah. And I don't know if they still have it, but they used to offer haircuts at the lounge.
In the lounge.
I was working for Bloomberg at the time, and the point that everyone was mentioning was that there were these haircuts at the lounge. So that's something that was really sticking in the mind of people. Like they didn't mention the food or the drinks or the armchair or whatever. Everyone mentioned, they have haircuts. You can have your haircut at the lounge.
I could speak for hours about haircuts and barbershops and the new kind of elevated experience that I think a lot of men are looking for today. But that would turn this into a different podcast. So we'll save that for when we do our spinoff to do the male beauty podcast in the future.
Yeah, that would be a great idea as well.
Do that as a follow-up. Absolutely.
Yeah. So you're now at JetBlue Ventures, and I wanted to ask you a bit about JetBlue Ventures because, as I said earlier, I think it's one of the most active firms in this space. You're linked to JetBlue, but what's the relationship with the airline? Is still part of the JetBlue group, or you have other investors at the moment? What sort of relation is there? And that's important also because, as you mentioned as well, it seems that there is some element there that when an entrepreneur comes to you, a startup comes to you, there's a bit the expectation that if the product or solution that they offer is successful and it's feasible, JetBlue itself might be kind of like the launch customer for that idea.
Sure. Yeah. So to answer the kind of specifics, JetBlue is the sole investor in JetBlue Ventures. There is no outside money. We're the wholly owned venture capital subsidiary. And, that definitely has an impact on, yes, JetBlue cares a lot about financial returns that come from this. And, although we don't disclose this externally, we're very proud of the return that we have brought back to JetBlue. And we carry above our weight in terms of what we do on the financial side. But it also heightens the importance of the strategic relevance of the companies that we invest in. Ideally, these are companies that we could see JetBlue using at some point in the future, and a very large percentage of the companies that we have invested in, if we have not at least had initial conversations with JetBlue, or we've not used them to educate JetBlue and to change their thought process on a new emerging field of technology, maybe it's gone even further and they're actually using it and they've got an offtake agreement, or they are using for example, Tomorrow.io is a company that we invested in that has hyper-local, hyper-real-time weather forecasting better than a lot of the incumbents. We were really excited that they just won a major contract with JetBlue's System Operations Center that's going to be using them as the official meteorologist of JetBlue. So we're very excited about that. And that is a desired outcome of the investments that we do. That's why we are strategic investors. And that's a lot of the strategic value that we're able to offer startups. Yes, we've got the backing of a really strong, smart 13-person venture capital team in Silicon Valley and New York to really get to know the business well. But we also have the backing of 23,000 crew members at JetBlue, of about 45 million customers during a normal year. We'll have to update that number, once we get back to whatever normal looks like in the future. But a huge amount of customers, a huge amount of crew members flying to over 100 cities in North America, Latin America, the Caribbean, and Europe as well. So, we can take a technology and we can put it in the hands of people that can give it really wonderful feedback and development and coaching. If we are looking to do something related to engine maintenance, we've got dozens of experts on engine maintenance who can be providing very good, very tactical feedback to the startups and coaching them to evolve. So I like to say, when it comes to investment and venture capital, money is money. If I give you $10, or if a major institutional like Sequoia or Bessemer or General Catalyst or Andreessen Horowitz, if they give you $10, those $10 are the same. You can take it to the store, you can spend it on this thing or that thing. But where we really make that $10 go a lot further is that strategic insight that we have as people who understand the travel, hospitality, airline, aerospace, et cetera, fields incredibly well. That's the additional value that we give to our portfolio companies.
Because I would like to highlight that your investments are not, strictly speaking, in airline-related stuff. You invest in the broader travel technology theme. So it could be software that helps travelers get a better experience, or help companies in travel space optimize their revenue, et cetera, et cetera. So what's your investment criteria? I mean, up to which degree a company needs to be linked to the travel industry, and how you define the travel industry?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we invest across 5 different themes. So the seamless customer journey. So anything that can help remove friction in the process for customers, whether it's getting from the curb to the gate more smoothly or finding a quicker way to book your trip. That's a seamless customer journey for us. And we want to make sure that we are reducing any points of friction. Reimagining the accommodation experience is the second one. So accommodations, wait a second, that's got nothing to do with airlines, right? That would be the first reaction. But JetBlue has another subsidiary called JetBlue Travel Products that is everything that is non-air ancillaries, from insurance to rental cars to hotels to short-term rentals to cruises to tours and activities. And we took a look at an Airbnb, for example, 5 to 10 years ago, and how much that radically changed the travel industry. And we thought, well, there are a lot of other players in this space, whether they're direct competitors to Airbnb or ones that are doing things a little differently, or ones that are playing in different parts of the value chain for accommodations. And we said, this looks like a really exciting space for us. I would also say from the airlines perspective, it's higher margin than simple flights are, a lot of the products that they sell. So that was a place where we really wanted to support JetBlue's corporate strategy and move deeper in that direction. The 3 others, I can touch on a couple of them quickly and could probably have a whole day set aside for the last one here. So next gen aviation operations and enterprise tech. That's a lot of things that are back of house that customers would not look at, touch, or recognize, but are super important in running an airline. Innovation and loyalty, distribution and revenue. So anything that's driving the top line, anything that's bringing more revenue into the business, and how we can be supporting that. We've got some really wonderful startups in that space. And last, and I think most important to us, is sustainable travel. The CEO of JetBlue, Robin Hayes, served as the chair of IATA for the last 2 years. His term recently expired. And I think he wanted to really use that time and say, hey, us as airlines, we've got a very important obligation here to lead on decarbonization, and we can make a tremendous impact for the planet if we do so. So he did a really wonderful job of kind of orchestrating the entire global aviation industry to make this a number one priority for the whole industry. And I think that's why you see so much of the momentum there. So we thought about how can we play our role on this? We've got a number of companies in our portfolio. I'd say about 5 to 10 of the 41 that we have invested in either have sustainability as their number 1 mission or their number 2 mission in terms of what they do. We were really honored. Lufthansa Innovation Hub, which I think is one of the best chroniclers of all the exciting innovation work that's going on globally. They did a research article back in May, I believe, for Earth Month that had either April or May of 2022. And they had said that they ranked all the airlines in the world based on the number of investments that they've made in sustainability. And we were number 1 in that ranking. Little JetBlue, the number 6 player in the United States, that maybe not everybody knows about globally. We were the top from environmentally sensitive, sustainable-minded investments. And they came out with that ranking at the beginning of Earth Month before we announced 2 subsequent investments over the course of Earth Month. So we went even further into the lead. And it's super important to us to do it right, to do it in a meaningful, substantive way, to avoid greenwashing. And we're really proud of the numerous investments that we've done in sustainability.
Yeah, indeed. Quite a few names in your portfolio that are companies that I've been following for a while. And actually, one of them has been on the podcast before, Universal Hydrogen. Developing an interesting system of capsules for aircraft to power them with hydrogen, but also some other companies that are becoming quite well known, I think, even outside this relatively still small circle of sustainable aviation. Like Joby Aviation, for example.
Joby is wonderful.
Joby Aviation doing eVTOLs, and then some others that might not be so well known by the general public, but actually I kind of admire as well, like Flyer, which is a company in software software company that's been growing massively, and they actually they recently acquired a company I had been collaborating with in the past. So, so it's a small world. Volantio, which is another company that operates in the software space. Air Company, which is also developing some interesting new solutions. So
Air Company is wonderful. I appreciate it. All of these are really wonderful, and I could speak about each of them for 20 minutes, but I think something that's really cool about Air Company, so they are a direct carbon capture company. So, they're trying to find a second life for carbon that's already been used. And I think one of the things that's really ingenious about them is how they pivoted over the course of the pandemic. While sustainable aviation fuel is one of their primary use cases and something that they had been spending a lot of time developing, but they had kept hush-hush until Climate Week in New York this past September. We knew they were headed in that direction. They thought during the pandemic, okay, well, what are other things that we can do with distilled alcohols to begin getting some revenue, to begin getting some customer feedback, to begin getting some buzz, to help actually prove the the chemical process that they use to manufacture their distilled alcohols. So what did everybody need, especially at the beginning of the pandemic? Hand sanitizer. So they began producing that. They began producing perfumes. And they also began producing vodka out of carbon. So it's the world's first carbon negative vodka. I'm not a big vodka drinker, but it tastes very nice and smooth. And it doesn't have all the bad associations that I usually bring to vodka. And what I just think is so cool about it is sustainability in travel feels like a very abstract concept for a lot of people. In JetBlue, we offset all of our domestic flights and all of our transatlantic flights. It's even included in the public address briefing that our in-flight crew members deliver, that today's flight is carbon neutral and that we're very proud of that.
Sorry, just one if I may interrupt you here 1 second. When you say you offset all the flights, you refer to the flights that you do internally as members of staff, or all flights, like all?
So JetBlue offsets the carbon emissions of all domestic flights and all transatlantic flights as well. Okay. And has really been a leader on that. But I think when we explain that to customers, I think there's always a challenge on customer literacy for sustainability. What is a carbon offset? What is a carbon credit? I don't know what that means. It sounds like it's expensive and I just want to keep my ticket price down. We totally understand that. And we totally understand how abstract that might seem. But bringing it back to Air Company here, I know that people are willing to go out of their way and pay more money to pay for cage-free eggs or bio milk or organic this or sustainably raised that. People care and people express their preferences through that. So when you have a carbon negative vodka, for example, we think this is the sort of thing that is an elevated premium brand experience, takes sustainability and makes it real for people, makes it tangible, something that they can make a purchasing decision that aligns with their values. So we love that. And, we want to find ways to get airlines to start serving this on board as well, because we think that would be a fun drink to have, that you could have a vodka-tini in the sky and be reducing your carbon footprint while you do it. We think that's really exciting.
Wow. Yeah. I knew they were producing all sorts of products. I hadn't heard about the vodka one, but that's really
they call
cool
it the Air-tini. They call it the Air-tini is the name of the cocktail that we really love.
Okay. Well, I hope the production lines of vodka and the sustainable aviation fuel are kept a bit separate, so that they
exactly
end up mixed up.
Exactly. Don't give either of them to the pilots. Don't let them drink the fuel or the vodka.
So you've got all these amazing portfolio. I think some 40 something investments to date or something like that. I don't know if that's an up-to-date
41
number. 41 investments at present of investments that are where you are actively invested in. And how does JetBlue Ventures fit into the overall VC landscape? I mean, you guys, you're in the Bay Area, which is like the VC capital of the world.
Yeah,
I'm not too familiar with how the VC world works.
For sure.
How you compare to, let's say, a generalist VC? Well, maybe not generalist, but a VC firm that that
Absolutely.
is not linked to a specific sector or a specific industry
Yeah.
player, like in your case.
Yeah.
I don't know if are there any significant
For sure.
differences, and also for
Yeah.
startups that are considering applying. I don't know if from the
Yeah.
startup side there's any difference aside from, well, obviously there is. We're talking earlier about this strategic element, but in the way you work, in the way you deal with these entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
what's the difference, or what are the similarities?
Yeah, absolutely. The way that we break it up is we think about the institutional VCs, and those are your major names like Andreessen Horowitz and General Catalyst and NEA and Bessemer and Sequoia. And I don't want to leave anybody out because these are all such legendary firms that sometimes we've been fortunate to do some co-investments with. Insight Partners is another one that I would throw out there and that we've done some deals with. So there are a lot of really wonderful institutional VCs. And the real value that they bring to the table is they've got wonderful networks when it comes to technology and when it comes to finance, and really great skills when it comes to coaching entrepreneurs and really wonderful networks. I think also to differentiate them from strategic VCs, they have very, very deep pockets. We have deep pockets. We can help write checks for our entrepreneurs and for prospective entrepreneurs, but we're probably not as we don't have billion-dollar funds, multi-billion-dollar funds the way that these institutionals do.
I wanted to ask you about this. You mentioned earlier that, well, it's a bit private, but you do. But I don't know if there's any. Are there any public numbers about this? I don't know if you manage one fund or several funds. I don't know if there's any public number that you can mention as to the size of the funds and the average ticket that you invest.
Yeah, so I can speak to the average ticket. We tend to say that our sweet spot is a late seed stage or a Series A stage company. I would say the middle 90% of the checks that we write are probably somewhere between $500,000 to $3 million. We tend not to lead rounds. Those are very rough estimates. I don't have exact numbers in front of me, but when people come to a strategic, they do so because there's certain industry expertise that we have, or there's certain brand name that we have, or an ability to help develop sales for our portfolio companies after an investment has taken place, that while many of the institutionals will have certain practices that are oriented around certain technologies, for us, we like to do what we do well and not get too distracted by other things that we don't know what we can add value to. So a constant conversation that we have is whether something is within our investment scope or within our investment mandate or not, versus many institutionals, the question is, okay, is it going to meet our financial benchmarks? That's the number one thing that they think about. I think we balance, is something going to have a strong financial case with it, to is it going to have a strong strategic case? The test that I would apply to it is, if the CEO of JetBlue, who's very plugged in and knows a lot about our investments, if he was to get a random question about one of our portfolio companies during a company town hall or during an earnings call from investors or at a conference, if somebody was to give him a curveball question in front of a large audience, could he explain the company that we have invested in? Is it going to be something that's intelligible for an airline audience and for an airline executive to be able to speak to credibly? That's what I like to think about of the test of how far does our scope go.
If I understand, you said you're not leading the round, so I imagine you very often you co-invest with some of those.
Absolutely.
Companies you mentioned. How is the relation as far as the, let's say, the traditional VC firms are concerned? What about the other airline-linked VC firms? Do you also work together, or you see other airline-linked VC firms as competitors in some way, chasing the same type of deals?
It's always a careful balance, but I think what's distinct about the venture industry is deals only get better when you get more perspectives on them, when you bring others who can add strategic value. If we have invested in a company that would really serve well by having strong commercial relationships with other airlines, we're really pleased to make an introduction to the venture group, because that's getting money to come back to JetBlue and a hedge against their traditional business lines in a really clever way. Yeah, there is some competition from time to time, but I don't think that anyone would ever say, no, we are opposed to doing a deal because somebody else is in it. It's another source of capital. we never have exclusivity once we have invested in a company, whether it is exclusivity of other investors that are in a similar space, or take tomorrow.io, for example, that I was talking about from a weather forecasting perspective. They've done sales with Delta. They've done sales with other world major airlines. And that's wonderful because that's more revenue that can come back to JetBlue at the end of the day. So we're not afraid of that. I think it's good too, because sometimes JetBlue has its own reasons for being able to move forward with a commercial contract or not move forward. So it's a good way to hedge against multiple business strategies there. So we're not territorial. We think that's a good thing for the businesses that we've invested in to collaborate with multiple airlines.
And how's the process like to basically get invested by you? If I was a travel entrepreneur, what should I do? Just cold contact you, or there are some specific paths for people to reach out to you? And very important, do you invest only in US-based companies, or your scope is more global, let's say?
Well, let's start with the geography. So to answer your question, we invest in companies from around the world. I can think of at least 2 that are based in Canada, 1 that's in Ireland, at least 1, if not 2 or 3 that are based in the United Kingdom. One that's based in Spain. There are multiple of them that have roots in Israel, or are Israeli founders that are now settled in North America. So absolutely, we love finding ones from all over the planet and working with them, whether there's a geographic overlap or not. Ideally, that technology can be used in North America and Latin America and Europe, where JetBlue's business presence is most significantly. So that's not an opposition to us. In terms of the process, cold inbounds are actually a really wonderful source of introductions for us, and we welcome them. I invite anybody who's listening to send an email just to introduce yourself to crew, CREW, at JetBlueVentures.com, all one word. And that way we can get to our pipeline and we can assign somebody from the investment team to begin taking a look at it. And hopefully, if it continues to go further, to help bring it to my team that helps to interface with JetBlue and put some of that strategic expertise and tire kicking into it. We see on average somewhere between 1,000 and 1,400 new startups a year. So it's a very competitive process. So if you extrapolate that, I believe it's 9,000 to 10,000 that we've seen throughout our history.
Wow.
And we've only invested in 41. So it's a very arduous process, but you have to. Bonnie Simi, who is the founding president of JetBlue Ventures and is now with Joby, one of our portfolio companies, she likes to say you have to buy a ticket if you want to win the lottery. So we encourage people to get in touch, even if it does not spell at the end of this that we're going to write a check. We hope that we can deliver strategic insights to your business. We hope that we can make warm introductions to other investors. And just that a conversation could be educational for both sides. So we encourage people to reach out.
You mentioned these 4 different themes you invest in. I don't know if you have seen some, let's say, some evolution in the topics or the investment themes that interest the airline and travel VC community, particularly these last couple of years that we've got this pandemic that might have been a bit transformational, maybe not as much as many people expected, but obviously has had a big impact in the industry. So just in short, what's hot now in general? And are there any specific major trends that you have identified in this space, in the investment space?
So I think something that is always hot is just having a technology that is adaptable to multiple use cases. I think during the pandemic, a lot of people got laser focused on contactless solutions and decontamination and cleanliness and things of that nature. I think what the longer term takeaway from that is, okay, well, maybe something is set up to be touchless, but it's really about customer self-service. And really, there are other ways to use this. And it's not just about spraying away germs, but it is about finding ways to reduce touch points between customers and crew members. Or if it's about document verification, it's not just about COVID certificates and COVID tests, but it's really about how do we expedite paper heavy processes and find other ways to move through borders more quickly. So I think if you have a very good backbone to your product that's adaptable to multiple use cases, that is a more durable business model.
So it's obviously good to have these solutions that are versatile, that can be used in different situations. And obviously, you invest a lot in companies that are basically supporting the travel industry, providing all these, let's say, optimization tools, making the passenger journey more seamless. I also wanted to ask you about, let's say, the future of air travel in general, the future of mobility in a way, because as you know, we have on one side all these climate concerns, whether we're traveling too much, all of that. Then we have all these new exciting projects that are basically aiming to decarbonize aviation. And yeah, I mean, there are different views here. We've got some people in the podcast that were very critical of some of these projects, in particularly those that are in principle more, let's say, more disruptive things, well, disruptive technologies that are not as proven, like things like eVTOLs or hydrogen, that require a complete change in paradigm in the industry. So I just wanted to ask you about this, how you guys see the future of air travel, how you see people moving around in the future. I know it's a very broad question, and there are many factors in here, but and from the micro level, because some projects like the ones you're investing in actually are very about local mobility, even if it's by air, and some others are more designed for longer distances. But just trying to make sense of all this. I mean, how all these different modes of transportation, all these different technologies, all these different ways to fuel mobility are going to work together.
Yeah, that's a great question, Mikael. And I think we have invested in companies that don't have to do with air transportation necessarily. We invested in a company called BetterRes, which is kind of an OTA and a distribution platform for bus sales, which it's not as big in the States as it is in Europe to have multimodality like that. Similarly, we invested, they were just acquired actually, BetterRes, by a company called BusBud. So we're always very excited when one of our investments gets acquired because it's a big validation. We invested in another company called Mosio that is really about multimodality. And I show up in a new city and I don't know the transportation options that I have there, whether it's using TNC, so app-based ride-hailing apps like Lyft and Uber, or public transportation, and how do I find my tickets for that? And they do a really wonderful job with making that easier for consumers as they arrive in a new place. So we've definitely hedged our bets in multiple places there, and not only focused on air-related solutions. But I think, look, I'm a huge mobility advocate, alternative transportation. I don't own a car. I think that's a big value alignment thing for me. I don't ever see myself owning a car because I think about the environmental impact of owning an automobile, and I don't think that aligns with my core values. And so I hope to support the leadership of JetBlue Ventures with a bit of that mentality. But at the same time, I think you need to meet people where they're at. And we're very attentive to the flight shame movement in Europe. And it's something that I've mentioned JetBlue CEO Robin Hayes a couple of times now. It's something that he was talking about back in 2019, and when Greta Thunberg was beginning to get big global attention around flight shaming. We take that very seriously. And at the same time, we recognize that in the United States, you don't have as many secondary and tertiary options. If you're not going to take an automobile, if you're not going to take a flight in whatever context that you're in, it is not the robust rail networks of Europe. It is not the robust public transportation networks. And there's something that's just geographically different about the United States, that other than the Northeast United States, you don't have dense walkable cities with great public transportation that are connected very well to each other. If you're between Boston, Massachusetts, and Washington, D.C., yes, you can get between cities wonderfully with rail service. But for most of the country, you don't have that option. So if you need to get from Detroit to Arizona, you have to take a flight. Or you either take a flight or you drive a car for 3 days to get between those two cities because it's so spread apart. So we know that air transportation and cleaner air transportation has to play a role in that, because people are not going to simply stop traveling between these cities. There's so much business interests between many of these cities in the States, family interests that are still going to connect these places. So air transportation is not going anywhere. I think we need to be pragmatic and say, how do we make air transportation cleaner through sustainable aviation fuel, through alternative aircraft types, and not just ignore the decarbonization challenges of airlines. We actually have to work very hands-on to address the decarbonization challenges in airlines.
Yeah, we need to work to make it cleaner, not just to just
Mm-hmm.
give up on traveling, because there are
Mm-hmm.
so many positive effects from traveling
Mm-hmm.
on a
Mm-hmm.
personal business level.
Oh yeah.
But when talking about this decarbonization, I don't know if you
Mm-hmm.
guys do you have some favorites here in terms
Mm-hmm.
of the technologies that are gonna
Mm-hmm.
prevail? Because we have
Mm-hmm.
people trying different things. I mean, the challenge is so large that you have people trying
Mm-hmm.
all different sort of things,
Mm-hmm.
from sustainable aviation fuels. You have
Yeah.
hydrogen,
Yeah.
electric. I mean, from your
Mm-hmm.
portfolio, I can see you've
Mm-hmm.
got a few of each. But I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
there is a let's say
Yeah.
institutional view about
Yeah.
what's more likely to succeed here in the long
Yeah.
term.
Well, I would say the view is the work of venture capital is to look on a medium to long-term time horizon and to imagine what might be possible in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, et cetera, and to really spread bets across all of that. I'm very confident in all of these areas that we're headed towards. Sustainable aviation fuel. I think maybe the one challenge of that is going to be, how do you scale something like sustainable aviation fuel? Is it going to require large production facilities? And is there going to be the capital that helps to drive that? Which I'll come back to in a second. Different aircraft types, whether it's electric hybrid, hydrogen propulsion, eVTOLs. We really have to be looking at all of those because it's too early to know, and they each have their own supply chain and infrastructure that's going to be required for it, that we need to be building these all out simultaneously. So I said on sustainable aviation fuel, it's a very asset heavy approach, but I think you and I are chatting at a very interesting time in technology and venture capital, that we are seeing in real time in these last few weeks the deflation of the Web3 bubble and of very speculative asset classes, of cryptocurrencies, of NFTs, there could be some good technology that's underwriting that, but we're going through the hype cycle right now, and we're seeing in real time it coming down a bit. I know in the last 5 to 10 years, the emphasis has been on asset light businesses because they're quicker to scale and they've got better multiples. But asset, by the very definition of the word, I did not pay very close attention when I did accounting class, when I did my business master's, but I think I remember that the term asset means value. It means that it is something of value, and that it is recognized on your books as a business, as a representation, as a source of value. So even though sustainable aviation fuel is going to require a significant asset base in order to be able to scale it up, I would encourage people to not be so scared of that, and that we do need to be working together. Let's find a way to make it asset efficient, but let's not get too scared away just because it's going to require significant assets to build this out.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to ask you about that, because it seems that many of your investments are in, let's say, software-related technology, software, or more like intangible. But you also have a few that are actually physical,
tangible
hardware.
Yeah.
Joby Air Company, I guess they also have
for sure
some equipment there.
Drinkable.
Universal
Potable,
hydrogen.
Yes.
I don't know is there any, let's say, any rule or any principle that makes you decide, or let me put it this way: are you more, let's say, leaning towards software asset light investments, or there is no preference? It could be any. I mean, it could be you do hardware as well. If someone has an idea, I don't know, they want to create a new type of aircraft or something like that, they can come to you as well.
We welcome all ideas. It does not have to be either or. What I would say, though, is it should be the right technology for the right use case. So if the problem that we are trying to solve here is, how do we use AI and ML to do a more efficient job of forecasting revenue and demand? And, these are things that 2 SaaS companies, or maybe 3 SaaS companies I could point to in our portfolio, Volantio, Flyer, and 3 Victors, do a really wonderful job of doing. But software is the right solution for that. And if you're talking about how do we decrease the carbon burn of our aircraft, there are both software solutions for it. I think of better navigational technology and routing technology as some companies in our portfolio. Beacon is one that comes to mind. Do a really fantastic job of, from a software perspective. but they have to be complemented by really wonderful hardware too, in the form of universal hydrogen or durable goods in the form of air companies. So I don't think that it's an either or, but I think it is a question of the right technology for the right use case.
Excellent. Well, I think that's the perfect point to basically
Yeah.
wrap up today's episode. Yeah. And I would like to thank you very much for your time today. I know you're a busy man with all these portfolio of 41 companies, and you said about 1,000 per year that you have to review. So, well, you and your team. So, so I get an idea of how busy it can get. Yeah. Thank you so much. And I will post links on the show notes so that people can follow up and can check your portfolio and all these different startups you have in there.
Absolutely. So follow us on Twitter, sign up for our news. If Twitter is still here, follow us on Twitter, sign up for our newsletter, add us on LinkedIn. We look forward to having conversations with really bright entrepreneurs and others who are in the travel ecosystem. So please be in touch.
Excellent.
And thank you, Mikkel, for your time.
A pleasure. Thank you so much. Bye.
All right. Thank you, Mikkel.
Before you go, and if you like this podcast, a quick reminder that it would be absolutely great if you could please give it a rating on Apple, Spotify, or whichever platform you're using, or recommend it to a friend or whomever might be interested. Thank you very much and see you soon.